Slow. It's
Nice.
live.
We're here.
We're live. Yeah, it's just so slow. Like I hit the button, it goes. "Nyeh." Welcome
Always a bit.
everybody. Anybody here? It's just Bueller. It's just us.
Easy.
Welcome to The Reason We Learn. Welcome to the Engineering Reason live stream and podcast with my good friend Kevin from Engineering Politics. Hello.
Happy to be back.
Yes, I'm happy you are back. I'm happy you're well.
Yeah. I've
Ish.
been on a bit of a hiatus there. I apologize for those of you following in the engineering politics locals community, but yeah, we went through a sickness. I get allergies at the end of the year, so I suffered like a bad sinus infection, and then my daughter came home with a cold, like a head cold. We all got tested for COVID. None of us tested positive, but she had to miss a week of school because you get the sniffles once and you got to get a PCR test to prove that you're well enough to go back. And it took a couple days to schedule that. And, she still had the cough pretty bad. So, but it took us out for about 2 weeks. Man, it was not fun. And then on top of that, I'm busy at work, which is nice, but isn't great for producing content, I guess.
Yeah, but you're back and hopefully you'll be back to it. So if you're new to this live stream, this is something that we do once a month. We get together and we talk about that intersection of politics and education. Because Kevin focuses on politics on his channel and his locals primarily, and sort of even political philosophy, right? That kind of everything to do with that.
I reluctantly cover politics. I don't enjoy politics.
Right.
I started with the economics space and stuff like that. And then, I'd rather focus on culture and stuff like that. And just, we're getting pulled in because of this wonderful president,
right?
Poopy Pants. And,
depends.
That's where we're at.
Yeah. We call them depends. Right. And I cover education, and very often the two collide. Actually, pretty much always now. So we can easily come up with things to talk about every month. So you look for it. It's it was for a while, I think the Wednesday, but we can do it this month on the first Wednesday. So but usually is. So welcome. Now I have a locals community. So does Kevin. We'll put all that stuff's in the description box below. Today, I want to ask you, Kevin, about your reaction to the most political thing that's happened in education in a long time. And that is that, as many of you in the audience probably know, the National School Boards Association wrote a letter to the Department of Justice, to the Attorney General himself, asking them to provide support, look into what they called threats from parents who were attending school board meetings. And they asked him to classify the activities as domestic terrorism. There were no specific incidents mentioned. And when I went and looked into it, there have been really only a couple of things across all the tens of thousands of districts that you could even classify vaguely as criminal activity, and they've already been handled by local law enforcement. So it seemed to me it's a little over the top. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, doesn't this seem like the beginning of taking political prisoners? Either they're trying to scare everyone away from staying away from those school board meetings, this is going to be effective. I mean, already people are scared to speak up because it's uncomfortable, man. It's right. Super, I did it via Zoom. I didn't even do it in person, but speaking up, even if you know your stuff, like I think I do. And I found out very quickly, I knew my stuff. I knew their stuff more than they did. It's still not an easy thing to do as a parent. Right. Because there's so many things there. There's so many, like, I don't want to ostracize my kid. I don't want to damage their social life in school. I don't want to get on the bad side of the school and make it harder for them and harder for them to get, through and get a good education. And then you have this, and then just the general, like, paranoia of like, I'm going to go in here and not know what I'm talking about and just say, this doesn't seem right. They're going to give me a bunch of jargon about how it actually is better. It's better for the common good if we teach them this way. Right. And then you have this element on top of it of being possibly declared a terrorist, right? Which, like, to be clear, if you're threatening someone physically, falling into their car, getting up in their face, that's wrong. But like you said, they didn't provide any context for actual instances where people did these things that they're saying amounts to terrorism or hate crimes. And I even believe they mentioned something about using the Patriot Act.
Yeah.
in there, which is that's insane. I mean, I thought we were all, everyone seemed to be in agreement when the Patriot Act was passed, like maybe this is a good idea. Very shortly after it, everyone's like, this is a horrible idea.
Right.
This is straight out of an Orwell novel. And I thought today in 2021, the left and right could at least agree on one thing: the Patriot Act was an awful thing. And now you have someone advocating for it again.
Well, and especially when they can't make up their mind about the word patriot, because, one day it's a horrible, racist, white supremacist, nationalistic, evil word, and you shouldn't call yourself that even if you're a veteran of our military. And then in the next breath, you see a letter from this, almost union of school boards saying, please use this thing with this name.
Well, it makes sense because, you already saw old Joe use the language of you're a patriot if you take the vaccine. You're not a patriot if you aren't. So they're already trying to use that language. But the way they're able to pass along the idea of that people are acting like domestic terrorists is the elimination of definitions.
Yeah.
We can't define anything. We don't have any standards. So you can say speech is hate speech, therefore it's violent, therefore you're terrorist if you disagree with the school's mandate. And I know we can already talk about forgot the guy's the Mac Alfie or whatever his name is.
Yeah. McAfee, I think.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's something like that. But yeah,
McAuliffe? Like, what McAuliffe?
Yeah, McAuliffe.
Said?
Yes.
That guy. I think it's like the guy. Never mind.
No, not the guy.
Not the libertarian guy, but the other.
Not the guy who committed suicide in South America after he said, "If I commit suicide, it's not because I committed suicide." Yeah. So he comes out and like, education should not be the parent's decision. It should be up to the school. It's like what.
They should be deciding what's taught in schools.
Exactly. It's this complete disconnect. And as I was mentioning you right before we started this, I'm doing a lot of research of what happened kind of in the French Revolution era, just the kind of origins of postmodernism and kind of what they believed. And while doing some, investigation and self-history lessons, preparing for some stuff with the Road to Serfdom piece that Truman from Return to Reason and I are doing, while reviewing that book, is kind of understanding Germany's trajectory to get from where they were to Nazi Germany, and kind of understanding that, mapping that trajectory and understanding that America can go the exact same route. And through that, we saw the corruption of education starting to happen in Germany, where they believed education was not, education was about educating everyone the same way. And if parents got involved, that was a corruption of their education.
Correct. And what most people don't know, I've covered it on this channel, but when people see like a 50-minute video, they might be like, I'm not watching that, is that in Germany, the system that Hitler put in place in 1938 is the same one they have today. Meaning like they have not changed it in terms of the laws. You only have the option to go to government school. There is no other option. And you can't, it's illegal to homeschool. And, I suppose if you're super mega rich, you could send your child to some boarding school in the United States or somewhere else, but there's not another form of schooling. And so, that hasn't changed. And the other thing people don't necessarily realize is that even case law in the United States explicitly says what McAuliffe said, that, the parents don't get to decide. It's up to, it is explicitly the state's agenda. Because this is their justification. The assumption is that the people who've been put in place at the state level were democratically elected. They choose the curriculum. Therefore, the curriculum was democratically chosen, right? Except it doesn't really work that way, especially since we created the Department of Education. So to your point, he says a thing like that. We parents think, how could he say that? And then I'm sitting here going, yeah, it's amazing he said it out loud, because most often they lie to you. Like he was just saying, props for being honest. He is saying that the system is working exactly as designed. Yeah. And for most parents, that's a newsflash. Yeah. They didn't know.
He was also cocky enough to say it in a debate while calling the other person an idiot.
Correct.
Which is kind of like amazing. It's like, prove his point much, right?
But in a weird way, I was both shocked and pleased, because I thought, like, okay, so what I've been saying for months, guys, and you thought like I was hyperbolic and I was making it up. He literally just said it. He just admitted it. And I believe it's because they think they've won, they can do this. And in fact, I was going to ask you about that too, Kevin. In your life, and I know you're younger than I am, but have you observed a pattern where things, administrations shift and things start to go seemingly like people sort of push the envelope, especially on the left. They push the envelope, and there's like a backlash and this yank, to come back and it kind of reaches this sort of middle. I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing that. The parents speaking out, I would think would be that form of backlash. Parents pulling their kids out of schools. The backlash is underway. The backlash is happening. And rather than having any kind of a correction, and maybe I'm misremembering any corrections, but I always felt there was at least a little correction, a little bit of a like, no, we never said that.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're doubling down. The Attorney General of the United States, like, we're going to send the FBI to every district and have a chat with and I'm like, what country is this now? That's new. Am I crazy?
No, it seems like a great theme to a movie. Like I just watched The Manchurian Candidate with Denzel Washington. I'm like, he should make a movie just about this Orwellian FBI checks out every local school to make sure everyone's falling in line kind of stuff. But no, I remember it like that as well. I remember there's like these natural checks and balances, which it should be. It should be, if the government's got an opinion and they all agree on this thing, it should be the pushback from the people. Also, a big element that's missing here is the media, who is just like in lockstep with this stuff, completely abandoning their posts of pushing back against power, right? Standing up to power. It's like you guys are just standing with the power constantly.
100%.
And there's no loud majority or loud moderate. Every single person, or I shouldn't even say person, every single avatar I've seen advocate for this stuff, or even in some cases people I know, they don't have any kids. Every single person I've talked to, of all colors too. Every single person I've talked to with kids in the system are like, yeah, this stuff is crazy. Like all of them say that. I've yet to see anyone or hear of anyone being like, yeah, this stuff makes sense. Or I even agree with a little bit. It's always like, and I try to never to broach the subject with them, but it's like, yeah, this stuff is crazy, but I don't know, where do those voices end? It seems like they're not getting out there, or they're being scared into a position where they don't want to speak up. It's like, we're going to ride this out. My kid's going to be out of school soon, and hopefully they can, go off to college and they won't be indoctrinated there. Right. So, so it's just the information's not getting out there, I think, because all these information pathways are being quenched so hard. And that natural pushback, that kind of public square is being corrupted. You see it with Facebook, you see it with Twitter. I mean, Twitter's not really a good public square in my opinion, but in those natural avenues in which we would talk to each other, especially in the area of a pandemic where we can't physically get together, so we kind of resort to Facebook and stuff for our connections with a lot of our neighbors. It's just not getting out there, so there is no natural pushback. We're not seeing anything super strong from the political class because, I know a whole bunch of Republicans came out and said, this is awful, but a lot of this needs to be defeated at the local level. And it really depends on where you're at. I know you said that the local Republican pushback in your area is not very, very strong right now, right?
It's worse than that.
Exactly,
our Department of Public Instruction is led by a Republican, and she actually endorsed what the AG was saying. Like, it was, instead of pushing back and saying, sir, stay in your lane or anything resembling that, she actually came out and said some things that were sort of echoing, or at least legitimizing, let's just say legitimizing what he said. And on top of that, she is apparently ignoring repeated cries from the people even within the government, lieutenant governor, other people that have surrounded him, people who have been activists for education in North Carolina against some of the most onerous things we're doing, like social emotional learning. They are, the Republicans on this issue are absolutely checked out completely. They sort of made a little noise about like CRT, and they're, we're going to have a bill or we're going to ban CRT, which is just feckless. I mean, you can't ban ideas. This doesn't have a political solution. So I sound like I'm talking about both sides of my mouth. I'm saying the Republicans have been feckless, but there's no political solution. But you see, here's the role that people play in politics when you have things that can't really be solved politically. You have to show leadership for the people. So you have to represent something. I mean, presumably Republicans supposedly represent a set of values, at least they used to once upon a time. And those values, I thought, included things like freedom of speech and things of that nature, right? And so this would be a golden opportunity to stand for something, to stand with parents. Some have, like Dan Bishop in my state has been pretty vocal, standing with parents and lending his voice to the voices here. He has done that. I don't know how great that's been, but it can't just be like one person. You have to have people consistently, persistently saying, while this is not in our purview, this is a local issue. And you can state it as such. This is, we believe in federalism. This is a local issue, but the local Republican Party, the local this, the local that, we stand absolutely united and firm and shoulder to shoulder with parents, with students, with everybody defending the right to diversity of thought, the right to express yourself in a classroom, the right to learn without indoctrination and just, learn how to think, not what to think, and so forth and so on, right? Even the right to privacy from these intrusive surveys and so forth. And that they could do. They do have a microphone that we don't have. They do have at least the air of power, right?
Right.
And that's what I'm not seeing is leadership. So there isn't a
Yeah.
solution per se. You can't just pass a
Right.
bill and make it go away. There's no one person you can elect. You can't even turn the whole school board and make it go away. But if you don't start giving voice to the ideas you think are the right ideas.
Yeah, I mean, at a federal level, they can only do so much with this. I mean, with this particular thing, with the FBI, that federal's in the name, they have to do something. So there's people, I have a thing up here with the Chip Roys already wrote a letter to Biden, and they plan on doing something about it because that's a federal issue. But when it comes to pushing back to this in the school, I live in a state, Wisconsin, that's got a pretty good conservative state legislature. They push back on this stuff. I think they're already trying to pass, CRT, anti-CRT legislation. But even with that, it is outside of the progressive areas, which there aren't many, but there are some, and the some that are in the state are extremely strong. It is very localized, and you have to keep voicing your opinion. You have to let them, because the biggest problem here is they don't know that there is pushback. And that's the biggest problem. They're in their echo chamber believing that everyone agrees with them because no one shows up to disagree with them. And that is when you have to step up in a local level, especially if you're in a school district where there really aren't many that are getting really, really great pushback, but especially if you're in one that you can't rely even on your state representatives to push back for you, you have to make your voices known. And they know that. This is why the FBI, this is why the letter is written, this is why they're going to sic the FBI, or at least have that threat there, that veiled threat there. And so it's got to take a local effort. So if you're going to keep your kid, the option here is always get your kid out, and we're doing it in record numbers, and that's great. But even as someone who has not gotten my kid out of the system yet, I can't be afraid to voice my opinion. And I can tell you from the last time I did voice my opinion, a whole bunch of other people showed up, messaged me on the side and said, I feel like I'm so unprepared to do this, but I know it's wrong. I don't know what I'm talking about, but I can sense it's wrong. Like people automatically have it, especially in America. This should be like the American intuition that says, I don't know exactly what's happening, but I can smell that something is wrong here and we need to make a change, because these people care about their kids. I mean, when you talk about the state effectively saying to the parent, and they have to come to this place, even when you want to homeschool your kids, they need to make sure that you're qualified enough to teach your own children. And that just tells you, like, they believe that they are qualified to teach your kids where the parents aren't. Right. And that's an insane proposition right there.
It is.
That is nuts. That is not anywhere close to the American founding. That's not anywhere close to what we should have thought of, decades ago when our parents were in school. It's that mentality that we have to change. We have to change it somehow. And there's just a whole bunch of issues, along the lines of COVID and mask mandates and just kind of freely giving up our freedoms that we've never really seen before in American history. Our ability to just say, I have this freedom, but I don't like the responsibility that comes with it. So I'm just going to shove it off on someone else, so I don't feel that responsibility anymore. We have to get that kind of reaction, that intuition back to say, no, I'm going to take on responsibility. I'm going to take on the risk. I'm going to teach my kids. I'm going to make sure that they are educated, because I care a lot more about them than some faceless bureaucrat in Washington does. And we got to bring that mentality back. And until we do, we're going to see, people suffer, because they're just going to say, I don't want the risk anymore.
Right. And, one of the things that I try to explain to people on my channel is that you need to stop buying into that lie that you don't know how to teach your own children.
Hmm.
You do, because if they're walking upright and drinking out of a cup and eating with a fork and a spoon and even, speaking
So
English.
I don't feel qualified. That excuse.
Well,
Yeah,
I
right.
understand. And it's still a myth, but it's a myth that the schools and the entire apparatus reinforce, and they reinforce for the obvious reason that they don't want people to leave, because then they would lose the dollars that go with that child. But parents have a lot more power, as do their children if they're over a certain age, than I think they know. And what bothers me the most about what's happening politically, and like I said again, that the Republicans can be reinforcing this idea as well, is they don't understand their own power. So you go to that school board meeting, like you said, and you feel like you have to prepare, and you feel like you have to speak, and what if I don't know? And you found out kind of the hard way that they don't know half the time what's going on in the classroom, because it really isn't their purview. They don't choose the curriculum that shows up in the classroom. They really don't even choose a curriculum that's in the school, because they just provide the budget. They make sure it gets paid for, but they don't choose it. It has to be in line with the standards. And most of the time, the superintendent, the principals, they tell you it does, and they don't know any different. They're not, or they are actively agreeing because they're members of the teachers union. But the power is not in those places. It's more right there with the teacher, right there with the teacher. And I think people also get caught up in, well, the teacher doesn't respond, or I don't want to be antagonistic, or I don't want to be that person. Well, what happened to just, hey, can we have a conversation? Just want to talk to you about some stuff, right? And it won't always work. But if you're a parent who is really concerned about your kid, start with the teachers. I'd start there. And then when that doesn't work, here's the side effect if that doesn't work, or the upside. You're face to face with the person at the end of that line, the one face to face with your kid. So if there's anything in you that's a little cowardly or a little hesitant to pull your kid out, or have them move to a different class, or try to get them into a different school, or whatever other avenues you could take, that will vaporize when you're face to face with a teacher who treats you like you don't matter, right?
Mm.
And if you're properly prepared, they can't really even lie to you. Like, they're going to have a harder time, right? So if you can get that meeting, or they put you off to the point where they make it clear they won't talk to you, it's going to be easier for you to steel yourself to do whatever the next thing is you need to do. The farther away you go from the classroom to try to solve the problem, I think the easier it is for them to kind of shut you down, and the easier it is for you to shut yourself down. So if that doesn't get anywhere, or if you get booed, or people start threatening, because it's very public. It's very public, scary. So it's a lot easier for you to go, well, that didn't work, and I don't want to lose my job, and I'm just going to stop and, hope for the best. But if it's just you quietly and just a teacher, it's like, who else is going to know? It's not video recorded, right? And you have those interactions and it goes poorly. Especially if you start with emails, you got like a paper trail. I think that builds up. Parents need to build themselves up, because there isn't, Superman's not coming. Super Republican's not coming. Super politician, even Ron DeSantis can't fix it in Florida. It's got to be us. We've got to do it ourselves.
There's a really good observation that, I think Carlin's been one of the people who made it, that, it's, she's talked about someone she loves, Matt Walsh, when he shows up to a school board meeting. It's really cool to see a popular guy who's on Fox News and has his own, conservative podcast that's way more popular than mine, to go up there and speak intelligently, speak harshly. And it's like that man, it's kind of exciting. I like to watch it on YouTube. Okay, cool, fun. It's different when you see a parent do it, when you see an everyday person. Like, that's inspiring. Like, that's powerful.
Yep.
And I think parents need to understand, I think there's a reason you see a lot of women do it, because it's mama bear mode, I think is another element. That's just, that's something that I think, it's just a special feature you can tap into. That's just, it means like, this is my kid. I protect my kid. I stand up for my kid. I want what's best for my kid, and that's why it's so powerful.
Yeah.
So it's. I mean, I kind of started this by saying, like, watching the famous people do it, cool, whatever. Watching the everyday person do it is like, wow, that makes me feel like I can do this.
Right.
That person just had enough courage, or was fed up enough to be like, I'm the parent. Just because this kid crosses some imaginary school line to get on school property does not make the teacher their parent.
Right.
I am their parent, and I will make sure I do what's best for my kids. Because I mean, the stuff that they're protecting right now is not just CRT. It's not just mask mandates. It's like
Data
sexually
mining.
explicit, data mining, sexually explicit material, which is insane. I mean, that should really, it doesn't matter where you are on the political
Right.
spectrum, what you think about equity and all this other stuff. This type of like sexually explicit material and some of the probing questions that ask your kid about their gender identity and the power that takes away from you if your kid starts questioning themselves at age 8, and the resources they can have to say, okay, we're going to put this person in, like, not even talking to you. You can go see the school counselor and do all these different things. That's the power they take. They're taking parental rights away from you, and you should recognize that and say, I'm taking that back. I'm taking the responsibility back. Even if I'm scared of a little bit of freedom, like, don't be scared of being a parent. You know what's best for your child. No one's going to care more about your child than you do, and you have to take on that responsibility.
Let me ask you this. Where do you stand on See, I mean, this is always a tough question for me because I'm against the whole government run apparatus. I'm an abolitionist. So I think we need to decentralize and decommission the entire system, not, tomorrow, but, gradually in a staged phased process, but turn it back over to localities, like even the town level, turn it back over to a real choice where it's not, just like, here's the line and we draw it and you can't go here and there, but a real choice with
So to be clear, abolitionist is not anarchist, right?
no,
It is
no, no,
you're
no.
advocating for the federalism.
I'm very specifically talking about abolishing the government monopoly
Mhm.
on the dollars that we use for education,
Mhm.
including public education. So, for example, if you wanted to have a local public option in your town or your city or something like that, and the democratically elected people that you put in power there said, yeah, let's do it, and let's organize a group to decide what it should be, and but still make it opt in, sort of like the post office. Like,
Mhm.
we'll build it, and it will use things like, sales taxes, gas tax. We're going to use taxes that rather than property taxes, which starts getting the whole class thing. But we're going to use this much from the budget to create a public option.
Yeah. Well,
But
hopefully they don't lose your kids like they lose the mail, but I like the idea.
right. But you get what I'm saying. I think it would actually work better in small communities, to be
Mhm.
perfectly honest, not big
Yeah.
cities. But I think in small communities, because of economies of scale, it
Mhm.
actually works way better than trying to have like 5 different little private schools for those who don't want to homeschool. But
Mhm.
for, big cities, I think you could have lots of charters and lots of private schools and lots of little homeschool pods and all kinds of things. You have critical mass of people and organizations and money and things like that. But I still think that should be at the state level again, no more federal department. It should be local, and the rest should be privatized and let the dollars follow the kid and be done with it. How would it work for poor kids? Well, they already have food stamp. They have a SNAP card. Okay, there maybe education dollars go on there. I don't know. I'm not the wonky person to figure out how that works. I'm just saying philosophically, it should not be one centrally planned,
Mhm.
gigantic monopolistic system. That's what I'm talking about. And I definitely do not like the fact that they set the curriculum for everybody. I don't like the accreditation process, etc. But having said all that, um how do you since that's not in the offing like anytime soon, what do you think about proposals that would, on a state by state basis, um, restore parental rights within the schoolhouse to the extent that for example, right now, you've got a social emotional learning company, Panorama Ed. They produce these questionnaires that ask kids probing questions about themselves that are, in my personal opinion, wildly inappropriate.
Mhm.
Okay. And there's a loophole apparently that they can get around some federal law, privacy law, and do it because the survey company employees are being designated school officials.
Mm.
And so because even though they're a private contractor, because they designate them school officials, that's okay then.
Mhm.
And the parents don't have to give consent. Now, I think this is a slick little trick and wrong. And I think that it shouldn't be allowed. I hate doing that because I'm not a big one for like make laws and regulate everything. That's the opposite of what I usually stand for. But I think the amount of profiteering going on right now on the backs of people who've had a horrible 2 years, they're using that as an excuse. That we need to attend to their mental illness and needs and all the things and
Hmm.
stuff from the past 2 years. And there's a lot of conflict of interest. Merrick Garland's daughter is married to the guy who's one of the co-founders of the company,
Mm.
and they're getting huge money from the relief money from this Recovery Act stuff. And what do you think about legislation that would say, yeah, you can't data mine our children?
Yeah, I think some obviously you have to get in the specifics of the legislation, but something like that, I mean, a questionnaire, I don't care if it's internal or external. I think something as much as just a test should be available on demand for parents. If it is given, if it's a piece of paper given to the children and it's never meant to exit the school, it should be available online.
Right.
Absolutely. You should be able to. And I'm not, I'm certainly not as libertarian as you are, I would say, but I'm certainly agree with the localism aspect. If I can't eliminate the DOJ in this hypothetical, I guess, the next best step would be to have some sort of transparency between the school, because in school, in this context, it's different if this would happen. I think the waters would be more muddy if this happened in a private school, because that's a private business. But considering this is public education dollars, you should have transparency here with
Right.
the kids who are forced to go into this program. You should be able to see every single document
Right.
handed out to them. You should be able to see every single prepared questionnaire asked of your children. You shouldn't have to fill out a freedom of information request to do this.
Yeah.
That's insane to me, that you
Right.
have to go through that type of
And
bureaucratic
it didn't
nonsense.
used to be that way. Like,
Yeah.
for starters, they weren't doing these kinds of surveys, this whole
Hmm.
social emotional learning thing. And then we used to have textbooks we bring home, or we had, even dittos. Remember dittos? Little
Yeah.
purple things. They smell
Yep.
good. Anyway, but we had things we would take home. And your parents, if they were paying attention, could be like, "What's your homework? Let me look through your folder and let me see what you got." And you'd write it in a little notebook, like read chapter 2, and you'd have your book. And remember, we used to have to make paper covers for our books to protect them. And so I don't
Hmm.
know, maybe I'm dating
No,
myself,
no, we had to do that.
but okay. So not that that was 100% transparency. There would still be things they'd show you, films or film strips, or talk about things in class and have guests come to school and things like that. But for the most part, you had a syllabus
Hmm.
that you'd have at the beginning of the year. This is your syllabus. These are the chapters. These are going to be assignments. This is where the midterm is. So you could kind of plan, and parents could look at it and understand what's going on. They get none of that now.
Hmm.
When they walk into school day one, whatever is going on in that classroom is a complete mystery to the parents. And that is why the shoulder surfing was so shocking, because I knew as a tutor for the last 10 years or so, I knew what the heck was going on in there. And I try to tell parents gently, like, your A student that you think is doing so well, but you can't understand why they don't know things because they don't know them. They never
Hmm.
were taught them. So I had, high school kids didn't know their multiplication tables, didn't know what a complete sentence was, didn't know the parts of speech. Okay. So, and now you try to tell a parent, like, well, it's because Johnny doesn't know the parts of speech. I'm sorry, what? They don't know the parts of speech. You must be, you're crazy. What?
Hmm.
Surely they're ninth grade. They have to know that. And like, but they don't, but they got an A, or they came home with, this report card or whatever said they were doing fine. But did you ever see them read a book at home? Did
Hmm.
you ever see the homework? Well, no, they're doing it on the Chromebook, or they're doing it on the computer. It's all in Canvas, or it's all in Google Docs or Google Classroom or whatever. I said, okay, so it's first of all, they're keyboarding, so they have no handwriting. And you've not actually read it because they hit submit and it was gone. They
Hmm.
did whatever they did. They said whatever they said. They hit submit. You never saw a returned copy with circles and red marks and A or B or whatever written on it. You just got the final product and that's it. And they've moved to that model, I believe, to conceal from parents what they're not teaching, what their teachers don't know, because it's
Hmm.
really a big jobs program. So no, for real. So
Okay.
if it's not transparent, this is what you get. Like, this is when you can hide and when parents let it go that I can't see stuff. What's sad to me is that, and I'm usually really pro parent, but I'm going to say something that's probably going to insult some people. Parents drop the ball.
Hmm.
Parents drop the ball big time because they did this because they could do this. Now, some parents drop the ball because, again, the family has been decimated for decades. And I would argue in large part because of government programs, things. But here we are. And it happened at all levels. It's happening in private school, and private school parents who pay upwards of $70,000 a year when you take tuition and annual fund contributions and put them together are still like, what is happening in my child's school? And I'm like, you spend more than most people make a year on your kids' elementary school. Like, what the hell are you doing? And they just defer. And maybe it's because of the education we had or they had
Hmm.
in this same education system. It's like the experts, the teachers, the educators, they're heroes, bow at their feet, and I will defer. You're seeing it in medicine too, right? We're seeing it now in medicine.
Hmm.
He has a lab coat on. Surely he knows more than you, person who invented the mRNA, right? Like, you're wearing a suit. He has a lab coat. I bet I have MD after my name. Yeah, but he has a lab coat. I mean, like,
Yeah.
I'm literally seeing people say things like this.
Or I mean, like someone like Bill Gates, who has as much vaccine experience as I do,
Right.
being taken as
But we're
expert.
not
Just,
giving any medical
respect.
advice or saying anything whatsoever, negative,
Mhm.
positive, or otherwise about it. We are just making an observation about authority figures and perceptions. We are not actually speaking about the thing in question. Continue.
Yeah. So, I mean, what you brought up there, I think, is really good, and it's a hard pill to swallow. That parents like this is you guys. This is your time to stand up for your children.
Yeah.
I think the idea of that is it's a true idea that I was brought up in the system. How am I supposed to know how to act outside of it? Right. That's a really convenient excuse, but at some point, personal responsibility has to play a role. We say this with a lot of groups who are caught in really, really bad situations, that it's like when people from the outside come in and say, I'm going to make it better, especially if they have some sort of government name associated with them, some three letter name, that's normally a bad sign. But you have to take that personal responsibility to really parent your kids, and so something that I became a lot more active in a school parenting role, I would say, at least because I knew a lot about the CRT stuff. This is stuff I was studying like years ago, and when I saw it pop up, that kind of activated. I mean, there's a real name for it, and I don't remember what it is, but um, it's normally associated with the media. It's like when the media tells you something happening in Iraq, you're like, oh, the media said it must be true. If media is telling you something happened, in the state, hundreds of miles away, oh, it must be true. And when the media tells you that, the New York Yankees pitcher was caught with, PEDs or something like that. But it's like, oh no, I'm a Yankees fan. I know that's not true. I'm just going to assume that that's not true, that they just have their sports wrong, but everything else is true.
Right.
It's like, no, that when you learn that one thing that you know a lot about is untrue, then it's like, I start assuming that things are going wrong. And that's kind of what activated me to be a more proactive parent. But the other part that activated me to be a more proactive parent is being on with you. I think you gave me a bunch of confidence in understanding how the system works. So that's why everyone listening right now, great resource right here.
I'm doing it. I'm
Yes,
doing what I wanted to do.
you're doing an awesome job of it, by the way. But
That's
but that,
literally all
yeah.
I wanted to do. Like, when I started this, I thought to myself, if I could just take what I, kind of what I know, and I don't know everything, but I know enough to know that something's wrong, and I know where to
Mhm.
look. Like, I know that I should look, and I know where to look. And I figured if I could give these skills to help people, like,
Mhm.
okay, this is where they hide it. This is how they twist the words. They move the coconuts.
Mhm.
This is what we do. And because it breaks my heart to see parents feeling disempowered and feeling helpless. And I've felt that way a long time because I'm a school choice proponent.
Mhm.
So even if you removed like the woke stuff, right? I don't like the fact that there are parents out there who have kids trapped in a bad district, like, or with a failing school, with a school that's violent, with a school where, no one could even hope to learn anything because the discipline is non-existent. And I mean, that's without the curriculum being destroyed. And one could argue, I would argue even, that it got that way because they dumbed down the curriculum and they dumbed down the discipline and they like kind of denigrated everything. So it was easier for the school to fail because what is there that's going to be successful? There is no foundation. There's no structure. um Whether you're for or against structure in school, if kids are growing up in a somewhat chaotic environment, which is more the case in neighborhoods, or urban areas or whatever, they actually crave structure and discipline. Like, it
Mhm.
makes them feel safer because their rest of their world is totally,
Mhm.
chaotic. And they did away with that, thinking they would be nice and everything. And that's just so many mistakes. And I feel like we just keep doubling down and doubling down and doubling down. So all I wanted to do was come across to parents, say, that gut, that little voice inside that says, this can't be right. Like, this is not what I remember. I don't remember math looking like that. I remember this. And I don't remember not being able to read in fourth grade, like all the
Mhm.
things that are happening. Um, you're right. I just want to say, whatever that thing is that you think, you're right. You've got something there. Keep going, and then help them navigate that process. And so I began being happy seeing people were standing up at school board meetings, because for the reason you said, it makes people feel like, well, if they could do it, I could do it. Like, if they can advocate for their child, then I can. I don't have to be the foremost expert on everything to do it. But I did get worried before this ever happened with the AG. I got worried because I saw it getting really heated. I realized through my own research that they didn't have the power we all thought they did. Even I didn't know how powerless they were. Justice Graves helped me learn that. I looked it up on my own, etc. And then I thought, okay, we need to pivot. I need to get the word out quickly. These parents, we got to pivot, because I knew, just like the police before Miranda rights,
Mhm.
they're not going to tell you. They're not going to
Mhm.
sit there and go, we don't have the power to do this, y'all. But they'll just sit there and let you continue to talk into a microphone and get all upset because nothing's changing until you lose it. And I knew it would be like January 6th all over again,
Mhm.
only with less provocation. And that's exactly what happened. And that's not a reason not to go to, you should still go to school board meetings.
Mhm.
Okay. Don't hear me saying do not go to them. I'm just saying go with a different set of expectations and different kinds of goals, and take the concerns about curriculum and things to other people in other places where it's going to do more good. But it did happen. It did happen.
Mhm.
And so it should tell people, you have more power than you think you do, or they wouldn't be trying to shut you up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I started this by saying, like, you're the expert here. I'm the humble person trying to learn as much as I can. This is all the people in the comments. I'm learning too, and I say that to, it has to be the parent standing up. And I'm not saying this is the parent who stood up one time pointing at you guys and saying, all you need to say. No, I don't know what I would have done if I didn't meet you and wasn't able to understand the things and how it works and how I should probably properly stand up for this. But it's all to say, it's like, you don't have to be some brilliantly knowledgeable in CRT or the intricacies of local government to do this. You go in there, and how I started off, because I always want to start out humble. I don't want to start out, aggressive right away, is ask probing questions. Go in there like you want to learn their process. And once you understand, which is going to happen a lot of the time, once you understand that they don't quite have a grasp on the process,
Right.
that's when you're like, that's when you go, mama bear mode. That's like, if you don't understand this, does not appear like you understand what you're talking
Right.
about. Like, if you're gonna, like the PTO meeting that I was in on, they brought up all the social justice equity stuff, and then I started probing there, and then they kind of got to the point where they were backed against the wall. I'm like, well, the person who knows about this isn't here. I'm like, why would you set up this meeting about this subject and not bring on the person that was here? That's just poor planning. If
Yep.
it obviously was probably done on purpose so they wouldn't have to answer hard questions. But it starts with probing. Go in there to genuinely learn. You don't have to go in there like you know everything, but go in there to learn. And once you start to see something not quite sound right, probe
Yep.
that, get into it. And if they don't seem like they can answer it, say, if you can't answer this for me, the parent, how can I trust you to teach this to my children efficiently and properly
That's a
if you
great
can't
question.
justify it here? So that is
Yes.
how you start out, and it's, you know, it's kind of a confidence builder. Like, you build up to it. It doesn't, you don't have to go in there again. Matt
Right.
Walsh is kind of fun to watch, but that's not a good way to do it. You go in there,
Mm-mm.
you learn something, and then you start pushing back where you know
Right.
you can.
But they really are serious. I just got a note from somebody through my Twitter DMs. It said, popped up, it says, just now, it appears Facebook has removed the Reopen California Schools Facebook group of over 18,000 members. No warnings were given, nor have we been notified why it's down. We hope this is temporary and have reported as a problem with the help center. And then they provided a reference link, and then they created a backup and so forth. But that has happened to other groups. There have been other parent groups that have been just summarily taken down. And once the DOJ is involved, they need only the thinnest justification. Ever since the January 6th stuff,
Mhm.
they're using, like, especially if they can use the Patriot Act, they're using the slimmest of, I mean, it doesn't matter what it is. Somebody could just say, like, these people all need to fall off a cliff or some crazy thing, and they'll take it seriously and go, well, that's a threat. So it doesn't take much. And on the one hand, there's part of me that's just saying they are so out of line and this is so unconstitutional. But, Facebook could do what Facebook can do. But understand, they are getting direction from the government. They're
Mhm.
taking their orders now. And now you've got this so called whistleblower who's saying, please, government, come and regulate social media more. Right. So they're probably
Mhm.
trying to avoid that by jumping on board first and doing it early. And their first people that looks like they're appeasing are at the FBI and the DOJ. So we parents have to get creative. Some, they say they're going over to locals. Maybe that's, do that. Don't even bother with Facebook. Go start your
Mhm.
locals group, your parents group. Um, another thing that like I suggested is, aim small, miss small is my new motto. It's from the movie Patriot. If you didn't see the movie Patriot, go watch it. Do you remember the scene?
It's a common shooting term, yeah.
Yeah, it's just, right. Aim small, miss small. But I referenced the movie because I loved the way he was
Yep.
using that with his kids,
Mhm.
and so I use it with parents. If you go to directly to the classroom and go directly to the teacher. Now, they're trying to keep you out of there. And some school districts have, barred you from visiting and all that kind of stuff. But they can't stop you from requesting a one-on-one meeting with a teacher. That they can't. I mean, you can request it and you request it again. And as long as you're polite and you say, I would really like to meet with you to talk about my child and their progress. You don't have to make it what it's about. Just, I want to talk to you about my child and their progress.
Mm.
And at some point, you're going to have a conference. You're going to have some kind of a meeting with the teacher, and just have notes prepared and say, these are my concerns, whether they deserve it or not, give them the benefit of the doubt, and say, I understand the school is working on this equity plan. And can you tell me what that your understanding of that word is, and see what they say. And if you,
Mhm.
and do not apologize if you disagree. That is your child. So you can say, well, I respectfully disagree with you. I don't think that's going to be good for my child. I am sincerely concerned about my child's perception of his or herself and mental well-being when they're being told these concepts. I want them to strive. I want them to try to achieve and not feel bad about it. Are you going to make my child feel like she or he is doing something wrong if they don't want to use pronouns the
Mm.
way you want them to? Are you going to require that my child, but you ask the questions very flat,
Mhm.
like that. Is this going to be required? And if so, why? And so on. So that at a minimum, you are putting this teacher, and if you can't get to the teacher, go to the principal. But get to somebody. Just be consistent and persistent. Make yourself available. If they say, well, that time's not good for me, what would be good for you? I will make the time. So, like, don't let them squeak out of it. And then ask these questions and record it if you can. If you're a single party state, record it. If you're not a single party recording state, let them know and say, would you mind if I recorded our meeting for my records just so I can
Mhm.
remember what was actually said? I really appreciate that. It's a rare person that's gonna go, "No, I won't allow that." Why? Then you at least know they
Should be your
said
first red flag, yeah, if they say
that's
no.
a red flag. Again, because there are 2 ways this goes, okay? It's not a I win or I lose,
Mhm.
okay? There are just 2 different pathways. There's one way where you make some progress and you establish a relationship with the school. And that relationship is going to serve you better than anything you do up here at the school board or whatever. That relationship gets you maybe an inroad to the teacher, to the curriculum, to know what's going on a day-to-day basis. And maybe you can persuade somebody to like not be doing what they're doing. Maybe it's
Mhm.
it's a reach, but and then the other way is you who need your confidence built up to leave, to persuade your spouse, to persuade your in-laws, like whatever that you need to like not be doing this anymore. You start to collect evidence like, well, they canceled 3 meetings in a row. When I showed up, they called me an extremist crazy person and a terrorist. All I did was ask questions. They told me they're going to make my kid use pronouns whether I like it or not. And if I don't like it, I can blah, blah, blah. You know, like how much easier is it going to be for you to go, I'm out?
Mhm.
If you have a series of those interactions, than if you're sort of guessing what would
Mhm.
happen, right? Because you can guess both ways. You can say, well, I'm sure they're not going to be that mean. They wouldn't do that, but you don't really know. Or I'm sure they're not going to talk to me. They're not going to listen to me, whatever. And that's not good either. Know what's real. Like my friend Barbara says, it just, you have to, you have to get the right meaning. So you have to get the right information to get the right meaning. And then when you have the right meaning, you'll know what to feel about it. But
Mm.
whatever you feel right now, if it's around information you don't really have, you might be having the wrong set of emotions. Fear is top of that list
Mm.
and the wrong set of emotions. This is your child. So I would say as the advocate for your child that I am, you need to set that aside. You need to be brave and courageous for your kid because they can't be. Especially if
Mm.
it's K through 5. If you have a K through 5 child, you're all they've got.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. Go in there, try to find out as much as you can. I mean, there's really two outcomes there. Is either you're going to feel a little bit better about what they said, or at least a bit better about your understanding, or you're going to feel more convinced, okay, this is the last straw. I need to take my kid out of school as quickly as possible and try to get them better education, whether that be, homeschooling, which obviously the best option, or some, alternative schooling. Either way, you can't, the one option you can't afford is not doing anything.
That's true. You
And,
got to
and
do
that, yeah.
something. I mean, even if the people are like, I can't leave and can't do this, I'm like, okay, well, then you're going to need to be like hyper involved. So you choose your hard. Like it's hard to
Yeah.
leave, but I personally always felt it harder to be in it.
Mm.
You're dancing around their music. I mean, like you're dancing to their tune around their schedule and trying to supplement your child, with the missing information they're not giving them and deprogram them from the crap they're putting in there is a full-time job. And if your issue is I have a full-time job, I can't teach my kid, I'm like, guess what? I hate to break it to you.
Mm.
You're going to be teaching your kid if you care about them because they're going to come home and say, as somebody said in my locals yesterday, she took her granddaughter out and they went out for the day and so forth. And the girl was looking and there was a group of bikers. She said, there's an awful lot of white people over there. Like
Mm.
13-year-old kid, you won't really expect that to come out of their mouth.
Yeah.
And she said it in a way that indicated she was kind of disapproving.
Yeah.
And now you have to have that conversation. Why do you have to have that conversation? Because a teacher and a school program put that idea in their head. So
Mm.
your own family life, your weekends, your nights are going to be infused with this garbage. And as Kevin pointed out at the beginning, what if you wake up one day and your beautiful little daughter comes to you and says, my new name is this, and I henceforth am going to be known as, whatever boy name, and I'm a boy now. And they came out of nowhere, right?
Mm.
What are you
Yeah.
gonna do?
Well, I mean, another good point you brought up before is like you're sending your kids to school to get educated, not to go to a psychiatrist, and that's kind of what they're treating it as now. And
Yeah,
when you see your kid make a change like that, the first thing I do is make sure they're not on social media, YouTube, stuff like that. This is just a breeding ground for that type of confusion. So make sure you're you know um, being a good educator at home when they're not at school. You're always an educator when you're a parent. You have to educate your children. You have to make sure they stay away from the stuff that's going to just lead to more confusion if you're not going to explain it yourself. I mean, there's another big movement, and when it comes to the sexually explicit material, is the stuff about they're trying to replace the parents' birds and the bees talk by a government-sponsored birds and the bees talk, and I mean that's horrifying. And you're naturally going to get stuff like this that is just going to be confusing, meant to be confusing in some cases, and meant to utilize those kind of the psychology of it to send your kids to a psychologist instead of a school to be educated. So it's another parenting responsibility to teach your kids about that stuff before someone else does.
Sure.
Before the school tries to take control of that. So going back to I think our first conversation, you have to be proactive. You have to. You can't just say hands off, school. I think's got this. I'm just going to be super sorry if I missed something, but that's going to be the school's responsibility. Too many parents, I think, push off the parenting role to the teacher, and this is what you get. This the natural conclusion of that action.
Yes. And one thing too is that I think sometimes people think it's sort of like smoking and quitting smoking. You're like, well, it's too late now. I've done the damage or whatever. Or like, we're in it. I got the year has begun or whatever. And I would say to people, no, it's never too late to do the right thing for your kids. And even if your kids are like, what are you doing? And I don't want to, I mean, you must think ahead. You have to play the long game, and you have to think that, well, right now they've got, like it's again, an elementary school kid. If you have, that age, they love you and they're doing this, they're going to school, but these ideas are pernicious, and it won't be long before they start questioning every value you hold and themselves and so forth. And then you have a teenager. I mean, teenagers naturally pull away from their kids. Now imagine you have one that hates you and everything that you stand for, even if you're not some kind of dogmatic, like you will be home in my house, like you're not even that kind of parent, but they're treating you like you are. Where are you going to go? You can't, it's not going to work to get more lenient, right? That's not what they're pissed off about. They're pissed off at your entire worldview. And you can't change that to build your relationship with your child. And they've just come out, I think this week, there was something about in some of the materials where the family is a problem. It's explicitly stated in BLM curriculum. It's explicitly stated the family is a problem.
Yeah.
And so you've got to, so what I'd say to people too, is when you have a break, like if it's a 3-day weekend or coming up on, like the mid-year or something, or the Christmas break, spend some time as an academic exercise. What if my kid were not in this school anymore? What would I do? And just go through that process, and that's part of why my channel is here. I can actually help people put that together on paper, like what it might look like, what you might do each day, how you're going to find childcare, all that kind of stuff. And then at least you know what you're choosing, like for real. And if nothing else, if they come back this winter with like, we're locking down, or we're closing the school, or quarantine every other week, and you're like staying home from work anyway because you don't have a sitter at the last second, you have a backup plan. I said it all summer. Some people listened. I'm just going to keep repeating it and keep repeating. I'll probably be here next year repeating it again, because it's never too late to make a change if it's better for your child or for your family. It's never too late. Unless it's literally too late, like they graduated. It's too late.
Yeah. I like that idea. Part of, I don't believe it's an Ember conversation. So it was me, Truman of Return to Reason, and Carlin Barasinko. And I don't think it's released yet, but one of the good insights that Carlin had is, we were talking about people who had to decide to either get the shot or get fired. And, Carlin brought up points like I said from the beginning, like, put yourself in a position where you can't be fired because you're basically your own boss.
Yep.
You have to insulate yourself by trying to do that, by having more control over what you do, and then I mentioned her. I'm like, we used to call that the American dream, like to not be reliant on someone else, to be reliant on your own abilities and take on the responsibility of freedom. It's the same thing in education. Like people complain about the cost of alternative education or homeschooling. Well, what's the cost of not doing it?
Right.
I would say one's a bit of a greater cost than the other. At least the cost of that alternative option.
Yep.
At least, but the whole point is just like, insulating yourself from being forced to take a vaccine you don't want to take. You have to insulate yourself and be able to say, I'm going to take the responsibility of educating my child.
Yep.
I can see the cost. I can evaluate it myself. I can do the calculus. I can tell you if it's worth it or not. I don't know the cost if I go with the more traditional option.
Right.
Weigh those options, and you'll have nothing to complain about if you take that responsibility on by yourself. And that's the best way to allow your kids to grow up and be properly
Right.
functioning adults like they're supposed to be with
Well,
a proper education.
well, the thing there we're always told is, well, it's for society. So we need an educated population for society. You can't do that. And I'm like, we don't have it. We look around. It's not working.
Mm.
It's definitely not working. So, I mean, we're coming up on an hour and I know you got to get going, but that's pretty much what I would say is if you're of the I want to make sure long term that we have an educated society mindset, that's really the biggest cost. And
Mm.
it's the one you can't it's not your personal responsibility obviously to worry about that, but if it's on your radar, it's not going to be fulfilled in the school system. They've
Mm.
made that abundantly clear. That's not their top
Mm.
priority. Having a truly educated person on the other side of 12th grade, and what do I mean by education or educated? They're literate, not just can read, but can read anything they want to read and
Mm-hmm.
understand it and speak about it intelligently to other people. They may not have an interest in ever reading Shakespeare, but that's okay. Let's say they want to read the manual on how to rebuild their, vintage T-bird. Okay, they can read that and understand it and communicate with the people who need to help them to do it. And then, they can do math as well as they need to do it, which for most people in an advanced society is pretty damn well. You need to know math to even function and vote intelligently because people are going to be throwing statistics at you 24/7 and you need to know when they're full of crap. But unless you understand numbers and how they behave and that correlation is not causation, a little bit of prob stat and so forth, you're easily manipulated, aren't you? I
Mm-hmm.
see it every day. I'm like, y'all know they didn't that's not what that means. That headline, those numbers, that's not what that means. That's not what that bar graph even shows. Like, what are you talking about? So that's because we're not educated. And same with
Mm-hmm.
science. When someone tells you, trust it, believe in it. Well, that's super. But if you can't do it and you don't know how it's done at all, you can't question that assertion. You can't say, "Yeah, I would if that's what you were actually doing or using, but since you're not, I'm going to go with my own, I'm going to go over here." And the only reason that people can manipulate so many people is they're ignorant. They're not stupid. They're not stupid.
Mm-hmm.
They're ignorant. It's a
Mm-hmm.
waste of human capital, and I hate waste. And so if that's your issue, then public schools are not going to get the job done.
Yeah. Yeah, a good point on the education part. Especially in the reading. 'Cause, whenever someone points to like Cuba, their ability to read is so high, like they're so educated. It's like, well, no, even the North Koreans understand you need to be able to read propaganda. Like it's very important
Yeah.
to have that element in there. So it's reading comprehension that's important. It's the ability to choose what you want to read. The ability to go back to critical thinking. And as I'm going through all this, like I mentioned a few times, I'm going through a lot of French Revolution stuff, and by doing that, I'm going through a lot of the Enlightenment period and the stuff they discovered then. And man, does it feel like we're running as far and fast away from the Enlightenment, the stuff we learned during that period by the so-called liberals, or I don't even know if they even use that label anymore.
Right.
That we're just trying to escape, that reason element, the ability to think for yourself, the ability to think critically, the individualism. We're trying to run away from. Certain people are certainly trying to run away from that. This collectivist mentality that I think a lot of these people, I mean, that is collectivism. When you're trying to create some everyone to the lowest standard, educated as they call them, people to go out there to just believe in the government and nothing else. That is collectivism there.
Right.
So it's something we need to be aware of. And us as Americans used to have a natural defense against that stuff, a natural like red flag meter that we understood, like, oh, bad stuff, and we're losing that a little bit. And it's going to be us to take it back. Can't rely on the political class to do it for us. It's the
Nope.
everyday person that's going to have to take it back.
And that brings us pretty full circle that we've seen that the political class is pulling out all the stops to dominate things that we've not seen in our lifetime. I haven't seen it. Now, people might tell me, back in the day and they had red scares and you had different things and where the government got really heavy handed. House, what was it? Un-American Activities Committee. And there were some pretty dark times in America when it came to free speech, but this feels bigger and wider, and the net is going wider, and regular average everyday moms and dads, like we're not Hollywood movie makers. You know what I mean? We're not newspaper editors, and I'm not saying that was good. I'm just saying, you know that is still a subset of society. I don't think like the average person was walking around worrying about what they were going to say around the dinner table. And now we have a situation where we're getting into that territory where you've high school kids or college kids, you might start getting a little chill around the dinner table because they might be of a mind to go and report you or say something. It's happening in England, it's happening in Scotland, it's happening in Australia, it's happening in New Zealand. And these are Western English speaking democracies. So look at Canada. They're declaring that you can't have more than 10 people. I'm sorry. You can't have more than 10 people in your home, only from 2 families for this Canadian Thanksgiving. And they all have to be, what? And you can't go anywhere. All these things you can't do in your own home. Your own family. What are they going to do? And you have to check. You're going to ask all your cousins and your family and grandma, like, please show me your papers before they can come in the house. And they're saying, and there'll be huge fines, like huge fines if you're caught. That is unimaginable to me. I don't feel like I'm living in the free world anymore at all. So the cost, as we just talked about, what is it? It's this. We're living the cost. And these people who are doing it to us are the same people who are educating our children every day. So,
one of the biggest takeaways from the Road to Serfdom stuff that I'm doing with Truman is it didn't happen to Germany in the 20th century because they were German. It was just an idea. A really bad, corrupting idea, a parasitic idea is what I would argue we're having right now. In the words of Gad Saad, it's something that there is no natural defense against it. You cannot inoculate yourself against a much, much worse virus, in my opinion, which is that pathological idea of freedom makes you feel not free because it's responsibility. And when they sell you on the idea that responsibility makes you less free, which is effectively what they're doing right now in the schools, trying to make you free of your responsibilities as a parent, that takes away real freedom. So don't fall for that trick.
Well, and paradoxically, they are being for people who claim that, capitalism is too materialistic and all this stuff. They're actually hyper materialistic. Paul Rossi wrote something yesterday that brings us home. He said, equity is a vampiric word that seizes equality, drains it of its spiritual aspect, and substitutes it with a materialist vision. It presumes the existing fact of universal human dignity is socially contingent on having stuff. It subordinates what is to a dream of what should be. And that's, like you're talking about responsibility or less free. And now they're saying that you don't have, you're literally born with dignity, right? You're a human being, but they're saying, no, you only have it once you have the same stuff as this other guy. That is just antithetical to everything that, free people stand for. What did Janis Joplin say? Freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. I don't know, but you have to really believe that that's the most important thing that you could lose. Nothing else comes close to that. They can give you all the stuff. But if what's in exchange for what? In exchange for what? Like the thoughts in your head?
I don't know. I think they had to abandon the the materialist aspect once they started handing out free stuff and had to sell it as a good thing.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I can't argue that you shouldn't be materialist, but we'll give you this free stuff, so you should really be happy about it and vote for us because we can give you this free stuff, and it's the equity of material, right?
Just don't want a yacht.
Yeah,
Like, you shouldn't
yachts are
want a
bad
yacht. That's somehow yachts. I've noticed that like
because rich people just poop yachts out. It's not like a whole thousands of people had to
Yeah.
design the parts and build the parts for the yacht. It doesn't supply people with jobs, and no, it's just
No. Well, they don't. None of these people know how anything works, which is a
right.
whole
It's fun.
other educational conversation about, what are our kids learning if they can pop out of 12th grade and make proclamations with certainty about how the world ought to work when they are coming from a place of complete ignorance about how it does work. So you'll hear them say things like, it ought to do this. And you're like, it does. But then it should do it. Like, but it does. That we already have that. Like that's already possible.
Yeah.
No, it isn't, because I was told and my professor said. I'm like, your professor lied. Like, what do you want me to say?
That's Facebook lit up for me when what was it, the space race was happening between Amazon and Bezos and forgot his name, and they're all like, oh, all that money
Elon
they
Musk.
wasted. Yeah, Elon Musk, all that money they wasted when they could have gave it to the hungry people. I'm like, you know how many people they fed by doing the space race? A lot of people who like earned it and did all like these wonderful things. It's like people just imagine they throw away money. It's like they get mad at rich people because they throw all their money in these imaginary big silos of money and swim through it like Donald Duck or whatever that stupid cartoon was. And that's what they imagine they do. It's like, well, no, they're out there spending their money. This is what you want. They're giving their money back by getting a service from it. And now you get mad about that. Yeah, that's a failure in education.
I remember that, like, somebody said something like, there shouldn't be anybody starving when we're sending rockets into space or whatever, or, how can that happen? And I thought, and I think I wrote something like, actually, there shouldn't be anybody going hungry as long as government is wasting trillions of dollars on do you know that as of this moment, kind of a little subject shift, but I got to throw it in there since we're on the subject of grotesque waste. We're spending $5 million a day on contractors at the border to not work, to not build the wall. $5 million a day to just sit around with materials.
They must be union.
No, I mean, the government signed contracts, and actually some of them are not even private contractors. It's just, we're spending money on ourselves. Like, we're spending money on departments of the government, paying those workers, their government employees, to sit around and not build the wall. They were put on a 60-day, hiatus while they researched and did a project with the border patrol to figure out, should we do it? They hurried up and did it by the deadline and turned it in. And then they just sat and went like this. And they've been waiting because they're not doing anything about it. That's what we do. That's what we do in America. So why are there people hungry again? I mean, remind me, what could $5 million do?
Right. And I think too, I laughed when you said that education is becoming a jobs program, because that's effectively, you're starting to see this kind of switch where the Democrats are kind of, I mean, you all see this from the hawks on both sides, but they're claiming to be more pro-military because they use the military as a jobs program. If you hear anyone say like, we're sending our sons and daughters over there to die, well, we're not sending them over there. They signed up, like, they know what, they're not like signing up to play go fish in a parking lot. They're signing up to do a very specific thing. Right. They're signing up to destroy stuff. That's what they do.
Yes, it is.
But they do it. They want to still build the military because they see it as a jobs program. They don't see it as an actual functioning body that's supposed to, defend our rights abroad. And it's just the way we're manipulating ourselves to circulate money, because they believe circulating money is a good thing. The whole, what is it, that modern monetary theory that we're starting to run into now, where it's just, we're going to recycle dollars. And that's what an economy is about, is to recycle dollars, not, build productivity and innovation and, continuously improve humanity through incentive structures. It's none of that. They're trying to create the zero sum game they've been claiming has been happening for that last, several centuries, because they want their utopia to become true.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, I know you want to go spend time with your family, so I don't want to keep you any longer. I really appreciate you taking this time to hang out with me and chat about some stuff. And any final words for people about anything that's current going on with politics, education, whatever? Anything less?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hopefully, gonna be coming back doing more content shortly. I'm gonna have an interview with someone exciting coming up. So I'll announce that when we're ready to announce that. But
Ooh.
I think what I really love about this community and this channel is the activity you see here in the comments section. All these people who are engaged with each other, with our conversation with each other, and that's a
Right.
great way. And that's the reason I love locals, is it's a sense of community. And
Yes.
for all of you people who are watching this and contributing to the Reason We Learn channel, I mean, if you're a parent out there especially, and you want to learn how to push back and you want to stay up to date on the status of your kids' education, this is the place to be. Like I said,
Yeah.
I don't know where I'd be in terms of I would certainly be in a position now where I'm like, a homeschooling is not feasible for me. I'm not even interested in looking it up if I would have talked to you first. So I think you're an amazing, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to talk to you one-on-one. But the
Aw,
people here in the
thanks.
comments, people following this channel are the ones that are getting the best out of this,
Thank
because
you,
they listen to your
Gary.
stuff. And yeah, you
Thank you
deserve
so
every penny.
much.
So
Thank you.
doing
And
great work.
this is Kevin's Locals Engineering Politics at locals.com. I want to give a special shout out because I know there's some people from the Hog family, from the Hangover gang in my comments tonight. And I want to thank you guys again. I want to thank you also for supporting Gabrielle Clark and her son William. Those of you who have commented, shared the video, all of it matters, by the way, even if you weren't able to give a contribution, anything to get the word out. I think, like Kevin and I have been talking about, we have to help ourselves. There's nobody coming in to save us, and we have to help her and get this case all the way through. And I believe we can do it. I believe we can do it. We the people can do it. We're not gonna, we're not gonna rely on anybody who's gonna own her or own us and or our kids. So in parting, I'll just say that if you do ever need any help, even moral support for what you're trying to deal with your schools, please reach out. That's what I'm here for. That's why I started this channel. And I thank you all for being here tonight. And we will be back again next month with another one. So have a great evening.
See you
Bye,
guys.
guys.